of attacks between Israel and Iran. We're learning the main hospital in Israel was hit, and in Tel Aviv, at least 240 people were injured.
President Trump has been weighing whether to attack Iran by striking a uranium enrichment facility, which is buried under a mountain and is considered to be out of reach to Israeli military equipment.
Yeah, that's right, Mika. So we just had an alarm, and from what we understand now, 6 areas were hit, according to Israeli emergency officials. One of them was a serious hit, and one of them was moderate. These were in the north and the center of the country.
Tonight, Israel expanding its assault inside Iran as the conflict between the Middle East's 2 strongest military powers escalates. The two trading a barrage of attacks for a 3rd day in a row after Israel launched what it called a preemptive attack. The US helping Israel defend itself against retaliatory strikes. And just hours ago, President Trump telling ABC News the US could be drawn into the conflict, but claiming that hasn't happened yet.
All right. Hey, welcome to this episode of The Soul Trap. I started to say an emergency episode of The Soul Trap, but every episode of The Soul Trap and Now the End Begins is an emergency. We are in the end, and once again, we've got our collab going with Brother Jeff Grider and myself, The Soul Trap, Now the End Begins. And if you don't know by now, you need to check out Now the End Begins. The nowtheendbegins.com, the bookstore, the podcasts. There's just so much material there that you need to check. But if you know, you know, and I don't have to tell you. So there's a lot of things we discussed. We've talked about things before, but here we are. So let me set the stage, and then I'm going to let you run with it, and you give us the 35,000 foot view, and then we'll deep dive into what we want. We wake up. And all of a sudden, it felt like, for those not in the know, out of the clear blue, Israel starts hitting Iran. Not a little, but a lot. They start targeting things because Iran is imminently, days, weeks away from developing a nuclear weapon. Now, Tulsi Gabbard said not so. But they start hitting. Iran retaliates, and then America says, you know what, let's park a couple of our carriers over there. Let's see if we can't get involved and threaten. And then all of a sudden, now the world is so upside down that Putin from Russia is actually heading up and saying, hey, I can initiate peace talks. So you've got Russia trying to initiate peace talks between Iran. Iran is threatening to close the Straits of Hormuz, or at least to mine it. America says, no, you're not going to do that. And it's percolating all over there. You've got Chinese planes flying into Iran. You've got America strutting her stuff with its B-2 bombers on display. Brother, from the 35,000 foot view, what do you see? What do you think's happening? Where are we?
Well, 2 things, and boy, did you just say a mouthful.
You really?
Right. But 2 things that I want to bring to your attention from a purely NTEB perspective. You know, you have your work there with the Soul Trap, and God has you on a unique path, and he gives you things that are very, pertinent and relative for what he's called you to do in that field. And the same here with Now the End Begins. We've been doing this for 16 and a half years. And talking about the day when Israel would rise up and take out the nuclear capabilities of Iran has been the #1 article that I've written about it hundreds of times, literally and actually. And we've been waiting for this for so long. So 2 NTEB specific things that I want to bring to your attention. If you think back to 2020 and the Bible verse that God gave us for that time period, which turned out to be a highly prophetic time period. Our countdown clock is still going. Today is day 1925 of 15 days to flatten the curve. And the interesting thing is, the reason why we keep that countdown going almost in perpetuity is because every one of the actors that was active then is active now. Yeah. It's like the Joe Biden 4-year pause, the caesura. and we just went right around it, and now we're right back where we started. So 2 things. Habakkuk 1:5, which was our verse for 2020, and we have retained that verse. Behold ye among the heathen, regard wonder marvelously, for I will work a work in your day which you will not believe, though it be told you. And this is Habakkuk. If you remember that movie, Billy Jack, from the 1970s. You remember that movie?
Yes,
And
I do. I'm going to take this right foot.
yeah, right. I'm going to take this right foot and put it on the left side of your face, and there's nothing you can do about it. Classic movie scene, right? Well, that's what Habakkuk is saying. Habakkuk is saying, behold, among the heathen, regard, pay attention, look up, because I'm going to show you what's going on, as is noted in the scripture of truth, and you're going to be looking right at it, and you're not going to be able to understand what it is that you're looking at, right? So the very first article that I wrote, January 1st of 2020, and the night before New Year's Eve, my daughter and I had a very quiet time at home, and she spent the evening on the phone with her fiance, and I went into my, bedroom / studio, and I started to work on my annual Rapture article for the new year. And God just got a hold of me, and he said, would you be willing to do this full time? Just jump into Now the End Begin. And I didn't understand it. It's like I thought I was doing it, but he was bringing me to a higher plane. And looking back on the last 5 years, I'm doing ministry on a level that I didn't even have in my head when it started, Right. So I said all that to say this. The very first article that I did that January 1st morning, Russia, China, Iran, and the headline was a quote from Iran where they said, we declare that the days of U.S. Middle East dominance is over. That was January 1st, our first article, 2020. And if you look at everything that's going on right now, all this craziness, and we would need a 24-hour podcast to talk about the craziness, right? Everything has led us to where we are right now. Mm-hmm. And here's the funny thing that people don't understand. Dr. Ruckman used to say that if you get off that King James Bible, God messes with your mind, right? Yeah. One of his cute, quaint, cranky statements that years ago I didn't understand, just like he used to say that if you get in the ministry, the people who will hurt you the most are people who call themselves Christians. Yeah. I didn't understand that at the time. Yeah, I do now. Right? Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you have all these things going on, and nobody seems to understand what Israel is all about. Nobody seems to understand why she was regathered, why she's there. I watched a very revealing interview with Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz.
We were just talking about that prior in the pre-production. Yeah. Right.
I watched it about a half hour before coming on here, and I'm going to play it on my podcast later. Ted Cruz and Tucker Carlson going head to head. Ted Cruz is trying to represent Israel from a Christian perspective. And Tucker Carlson, as a good Episcopalian, he's trying to get everybody off the Bible. But when you listen to these two people talking, Ted Cruz says, the reason why I support Israel is because the Bible says, and then he even says, this verse was drilled in my head from a child.
In Sunday school. Yeah, he goes, in Sunday school, I learn. Yeah.
Right.
And then the context, but yeah.
Right. I will bless them that bless thee, right? And then Tucker says, great, what verse is that? And Ted Cruz has no idea. Uh-huh. Tucker Carlson has no idea. Alex Jones, Nick Fuentes, Candace Owens. None of these people have any idea why Israel is where they are, why they're doing what they're doing, and what their immediate short-term 7-year future is. Nobody is talking about that. And if you don't have your foundation right, anything you build on top of that is going to be wrong. So you ask my perspective from the 35,000-foot view of what's going on, there is chaos. there is nobody knows. Trump one day, I'm sending B-2 bombers, and he did. And yesterday, the Doomsday plane landed in Washington, right? All this crazy stuff going on, and then the very next day, Trump says, I'll give him 2 weeks.
Yes.
That's a crazy person. That's somebody who is reacting from his emotions and polls and what his advisors are telling him to do, right? There's no stability. There's no plan. Who has a plan?
Yeah.
Nobody.
Yeah.
So the first thing that you have to understand is from a 35,000 foot view, chaos is reigning.
Interesting. You know, what's funny, we were talking about on the way here, because one of the things you're seeing is a polarization, but it's not a polarization now between two equals. For the longest time, Christianity, was dominated by a Judeo fixation on Israel. Anything Israel did was good. We're behind it. Israel could do no wrong. That obviously is an unbalanced position. What we're seeing now, though, Candace Owens, and I could go right down the line, is I call it almost a pseudo-Catholic position, to where they're like, hey, we're against Israel. Right. Israel is the problem. And I said this from my pulpit a couple weeks ago. I believe you're going to see, and are seeing, and will see, a massive uptick of anti-Semitism in mainstream Christianity. And it comes down to an inability to understand what God's plan is with Israel. Now, I'm thinking that it's going to be interesting to see, because I think that the Middle East, and I just happened to notice your article, and I have not watched or listened yet, but I think what you're seeing is a reshaping of the Middle East to where Israel might actually have hegemony. They might actually become far more dominant in the Middle East than we realize, setting itself up for, obviously the tribulation. And I was thinking, I told my wife the other day, I said, if ever you were going to make room on the Temple Mount, this would be a great way to do it, to have a quote unquote stray rocket from Iran start landing in Jerusalem, and maybe one of them hit the Mosque of the Dome, or for there to be some kind of peace deal, a pseudo peace deal where they can now share it. But I believe you're going to see Israel continue to prosper, and maybe even have real large dominance, because I think a lot of people, you can speak to this, a lot of people in the Christian world don't realize that there is going to come another dispersion of Israel, another massive Holocaust persecution that has been just totally glossed over, even by the Tim LaHaye prophecy crowds. Tell us a little bit about what the future is and what you think is holding.
Well, when I started doing this 16 years ago, I was one of those people, Israel will never again be driven out of their land, because that was the party line, according to the IFB. And I'm talking Baptist churches. Yeah. And never again. And Israel, God has regathered his people, right? But then as I began to study it, and if anybody thinks that they have mastered scripture, they haven't. Right. Exactly. We are all students. We are all scholars from a student perspective. Right. And then as I began to look at it, what became obvious to me was they weren't regathered as in the regathering waiting for the second advent. They were regathered to be scattered, because if they weren't regathered, all those prophecies in Matthew 24, and when ye shall see the abomination of desolation stand in the holy place, then let them which be in Judea flee, right? If they're not back, how can they flee out? So the first thing that I started to understand about regathered Israel, this is not one of the two official regatherings that the Bible talks about. In the Old Testament, it says, and the Lord shall set his hand the second time to regather his people. Well, was that 1948? Can't possibly be, because Matthew 24 hasn't been fulfilled yet. Okay. And let me just
interject something real quick right there. I think a lot of people don't understand either was there's a pattern And when you look in the Old Testament, when the children of Israel were regathered after the 70 years captivity, that was not necessarily a dispersion. That was a captivity. There were still some people left in the land. But second of all, the thing that's interesting to remember is that regathering happened in 3 stages. First was Zerubbabel, then Ezra, then Nehemiah. And so it wasn't just like, boom, it happened overnight. Right. There was a process of that regathering back. And I think that may be exactly what's happening here. First, there was that handful moving in, that regathering, but it's not been a religious regathering in the sense of them, they're set up for the fall again. So go ahead and pick up where you were. But yes.
Yeah. So going on the understanding that Israel was regathered to be scattered so the end times prophecies of when they flee to the red rock city of Sela Petra can be fulfilled, right? Then it starts to come into focus what 1948 was truly all about. And then when you go to Isaiah chapter 28 in verse 14 or 15, it says, "Ye scornful men which rule this people that are in Jerusalem, ye have made a covenant with death, and with hell are ye at agreement." Okay. Yeah. Well, I used to read that verse a lot, and one day it kicked in. I'm like, wait a minute, scornful men which rule this people, where's the king? Right. This is Old Testament. Why is there no king? Because Isaiah is looking very much into the future to a day when there's going to be no king, but a prime minister, a 7-member war council, a Knesset, right? Those are the scornful men that rule this people, which are in Jerusalem. Isaiah 28, 14, 15, 16, that's where Israel is right now. That's where they are right now.
Do you think that reference is possibly referencing as well? Because you look at death and hell, they've made a covenant with death and hell. And then you look at Revelation chapter number 6, and that last rider, and death and hell followed with him. Do you think that there's a connection between those two?
Oh, there is absolutely. There's a rock solid connection between those two. And where we are right now is we are at the closing moments of the church age. Okay? 5 seconds and we're going to be out of here. Yeah. But the time of that time period is overlapping us right now. And so what are we watching? We are watching Peter Thiel creating a Mark of the Beast system under Donald Trump's command in Washington, D.C. There was an article yesterday how his Palantir software is going to create an IRS-based database, and he is going to connect it to every major database in the government, every program, welfare, food stamps, unemployment. It's all. So the very person that we elected to keep us safe and free, just like the first time he was president, who locked us down and gave us a vaccine that so far has killed 17 million people. That same guy, while he's shouting, "Make America Great Again," is going to bring in the database and the STAR system and all these different things. And
I think we're already involved. I think if you listen to the Ted Cruz, we talked about this, Kevin and I talked about this. I think Cruz got so hot and bothered by Tucker Carlson that he actually gave up the goose a little bit, because he said, well, we're bombing right now. And then Tucker Carlson said, oh, we're bombing? And he said, well, Israel, blah, blah, blah. I think that he slipped up because he got so angry and gave up the fact that we are involved. And so America is not just setting up a grid system. Like you said, I think we're reshaping the Middle East for Israel. So, when you look at Candace Owens and these kind of things like that, this anti-Israel, it is interesting. I think Grady, for all of his Bill Gradiness, I think in his book about Israel, hit the ground where it's hit the target, because there has to be a balanced approach. They are enemies of the gospel, but they are beloved for the Father's sake.
Right.
And that's the reality of it. And, there is something to the Jewish cabal, the Jewish bankers, the Jewish, there is something to that. The Jews' control of Hollywood, the connection with, the AIPAC connection in Washington. At the same time, we do support them because that covenant that the Lord gave them I'll bless them that bless thee and curse them that curseth thee, found in Genesis chapter 12 and on. So it is interesting to watch what's happening, and then to see China, Russia, everybody right there on top of it. This is fascinating. What do you think the next 7 days are going to hold? The next 2 weeks are going to hold?
Well, I mean, it could absolutely go in any possible direction. I mean, it's really, really hard to be a prognosticator with events changing by the hour, right? I mean, Donald Trump got all hot and bothered and sent over a massive fleet of B-2 bombers, refueling airplanes, put up the doomsday plane, did all this crazy stuff. And then inexplicably, the very next day, you know what? I think I can bring them to the negotiating table. Okay. I haven't been able to figure out if Donald Trump is punking us or he really is just cognitively disassociated. Okay. He bragged that he could end the Russia-Ukraine war on day one in his office. Everything that he has bragged about that he has the power to do, he hasn't done any of it. Gas, still $3 a gallon. When my wife and I go out for breakfast, bacon, eggs, toast, and coffee with tip, it ranges between $35 and $46. We don't go out that often. Okay. The golden age that he promised hasn't materialized for anybody but his inner circle, right? And he thinks that this nation that is being bombed so heavily by Israel right now is going to just miraculously come to the negotiating table. It's like he doesn't even understand who these people are. They are not coming to the negotiating table. Every promise in 16 years of covering stuff coming out of that region, Iran hasn't kept a single promise that they ever made. Why would you want to negotiate now? That's insanity.
I was thinking about Proverbs 21. The Bible says the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. As the rivers of water, he turneth it whithersoever he will. I really believe the Lord is directing, drawing. It talks about drawing these kings. Of course, it's talking about the Battle of Armageddon, but drawing these kings. I really think that the Lord is moving and orchestrating these pieces together at the end here. I thought that was a fascinating thing. Somebody was not telling the truth. Either Tulsi Gabbard was not telling the truth or not hearing, because I've heard that as well, too. For the last, 15 years, 20 years, you've heard Iran is days away from a nuclear weapon, days away from a nuclear weapon. Well, either they are or they aren't, but for Israel to just to hit them now, very, very interesting. And then, like you said, Trump one day, hey, we're going over there, and then, well, maybe not. And then now Putin is like, I can broker a peace deal. How crazy would that be?
Well, how crazy would it be if and when Pope Leo XIV steps in to broker the deal from Rome? Because they're talking about that too. And Trump has already said he would let him do it.
Well, it's interesting because sometimes you see these little mini types that take place. Matt Crane calls them not the 4 horsemen, but the Shetland ponies. The little the mini horses. Man, what an interesting thing that would be if you had those guys there brokering that peace deal, and you've already got the Abraham Accords in place.
Now let's just talk about the Abraham Accords for a moment. I believe when you go to Daniel 9:27, okay, and he shall confirm the covenant. He doesn't create the covenant. He comes into a situation that is already set up and already established. If you're confirming something, you're not the creator of it. You're just a confirmer of whatever it is that you're confirming.
Okay.
I have long felt from August of 2020, when I wrote my very first article on the Abraham Accords, and when I dug just a little bit under the surface, and I found that those accords were not created by Donald Trump. They were given to Jared Kushner from Mohammed bin Zayed. And I dug a little deeper under that, and I found that Mohammed bin Zayed was the right-hand man of Pope Francis, who, when he created his Declaration of Human Fraternity, remember in 2019, he went to Abu Dhabi and kissed the imam right on the mouth? You know who was standing right at his side when they signed that paper? Mohammed bin Zayed.
Okay.
And the very next year, Donald Trump comes out with the Abraham Accords, which he takes full credit for, but all he did was rubber stamp it. They were handed by Zayed to Jared Kushner for Donald Trump to institute.
So that piece of the puzzle is locked in.
Yeah, so I believe, now this is just my opinion, I don't teach it as doctrine or anything like that. I believe that the covenant that is going to be confirmed is the Abraham Accords by the Antichrist, and let me tell you why. When you go to Revelation 13 and you read verses 16 through 18, and it tells you what the mark of the beast is, okay? Dr. Ruckman used to say, don't tell me what the Bible teaches, tell me what it says. And 16 through 18 tells you that there is going to be a device of some kind that is going to be implanted inside the human body, and the function of that device will be to allow the user to buy and sell. Now, you can get as Greek and Hebrew as you want to get and tell me what those words mean and all that stuff, but in its simplest form, the mark of the beast is a human implantable device to allow the user to buy and sell. Okay, that's exactly what it is. What's the Abraham Accords? It's a economic normalization agreement between Israel and Muslim nations. What does that mean? They buy with each other, they sell with each other. It is the Abraham Accords represent the heartbeat of the mark of the beast.
Yeah,
what do you do with that?
Yeah, that's fascinating when you start thinking about that. I mean, because all these places, the grid work is being set up for everything to fall right into place, for it to fall right into place. It also seems like while we're watching that happen over there, that there is a tremendous falling away going on here. I'm not even talking about Western civilization as a whole. I'm just talking about American Christianity. There is a darkness. There is a, not even just darkness, there is a dullness, a blindness that is just washing over this. And it's stunning to see it, because it's like really that many blind people. So you've got, on one hand, those things taking place over there. On the other hand, you've got apostasy here. What do you see on the home front?
Whoa, you mean the Christian church home front?
Yeah.
It is a bleak, dark landscape.
Yeah, happy Friday, everybody.
It's bad. It's very, very bad, and everybody is fighting with everybody else. Everybody is, the heresy hunter, and I'm going to expose so-and-so. Nobody's teaching the Bible, right? Nobody's warning the people, right? What are we called to do as Christians? We're called to be witnesses for Jesus Christ of his death, burial, and resurrection, right?
Yes.
Right? The Lord gave the word, and great was the company of those that published it. Psalm 68:11. That's our theme verse for Bibles Behind Bars, right? We're coming up on 1,000 people who have been saved through the time period of our Bibles Behind Bars program in jails and prisons all across the country. That's what we're called to do. We are called to be a bright light in a dark place. We're not called to fight with each other. So when I look at the social media / Christian church landscape, nobody knows any Bible. People are trying to slap Matthew 5 on the church, and eye for an eye with the Old Testament. Nobody's teaching the Bible, but that's exactly. And I was having a conversation with my friend Craig the other day, and conversation was getting a little hot and heated. Now, we're both, just like me and you are, we're both in agreement. But, things get hot and heated. And I reminded him, it's like, but that bad thing that you're talking about is actually a good thing. Like 2 Timothy chapter 4, where Paul says that in the last days, right, I charge you, preach the word, right? Because the time period that's coming is they want their ears tickled, and
Yes.
Bible doctrine will not be taught, will not be taught.
I know what you're saying. I got you.
And then you go to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, and it talks about the falling away. What we're watching right now is a vast acceleration of the falling away.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I see.
Let me change gears with you real quick. I saw an article that you had on here. June 19th is the 23rd of Sivan, the Hebrew calendar, and what happened on that day in the book of Esther may portend the next phase of Israel's war with Iran. Mm-hmm. So, if you're watching, you need to go to nowtheendbegins.com. The articles on there are absolutely fantastic. But tell us a little bit about that. I know what you're talking about, but I went ahead and went through that fascinating study, and it is interesting because when you look at Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, man, that's a lot of connection with what's going on right now.
Yeah. I started that article with saying sometimes you do your Bible study and you come across a nugget, and sometimes you come across something that's just like this really great, crazy coincidence. And sometimes it's right between the two and you're not quite sure what it is that you're looking at. Yeah. And Esther chapter 8 is exactly one of those places that when you look at what's happening right now, Haman, he was the arch enemy of Mordecai. Iran is the arch enemy of the nation of Israel. Okay. Ahasuerus started out with Vashti, who was his Gentile bride, and she was just removed. Nothing bad said about her. She wouldn't do what she was left there to do, right? Why is the church raptured out? Now, we think it's because the Lord is coming to reclaim his body, and yes, that's partially true. But what if one of the main reasons for the rapture of the church is we are lukewarm, we are cold, we are indifferent, we are fighting with each other, we are focusing on $1 million building programs instead of giving Bibles to prisoners, and all those different things, right? What if one of the reasons for the rapture is we're being removed because we didn't do the job like Vashti? Okay. Yeah. All Vashti had to do, and she served at the pleasure of the king. All she had to do was what the king asked her to do. Mm-hmm. And you'll notice the king didn't force her. He simply replaced her. He removed her, right? Well, to me, that's a great picture of the church being removed at the end of the church age. And then now you have Esther coming in. Okay. Yeah. So when you go to that, and I'm just looking at it now, Esther 8:9, then were the king's scribes called at that time in the 3rd month, that is the month Sivan, on the 3 and 20th day thereof, and it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded unto the Jews. Now, that wasn't the day that the action happened. That happens 2 or 3 verses later. That was the day that the decree, the behind the scenes decree, because the people that are about to die in the onslaught have no idea that this writing has been authorized. It hasn't been tacked to the tree yet, right? Well, that's what I believe happened on yesterday. I believe that there was a behind-the-scene things with Donald Trump, and he put a massive armada in place. And that happened on the, 3,500 years later, but on the exact anniversary of the 23rd of Sivan, I believe that you are going to see in the next week or 2 weeks, you are going to see massive American involvement.
Interesting.
Because the only way you can take out their main nuclear plant, is Fordo. That's the main one, and that's the one that goes 10 stories down, 100 feet down into the ground. Some people say it goes a mile into the ground. I can't imagine that, but maybe they've had 30 years to work on it. And if you don't take out, Netanyahu kind of boxed himself into a corner. Because if he doesn't end this thing with all nuclear capability taken off the table, he's failed. He hasn't bought time. He hasn't succeeded. If when he stops whatever this war conflict is, and the Iranian people still have the capability for a nuclear weapon on any level, he will be a public failure. So he's in this thing. They have to go all the way. They have two options. They can put boots on the ground and have airstrikes overhead. They're not going to do that. Okay? Or you can have the United States fire up the B-2s and drop about a dozen bunker-busting bombs and get rid of it. It's the only way.
So what does Russia, in your opinion, what does Russia and China do if that happens?
Russia, for the last 3+ years, has been fighting a phony war with Ukraine. And I say it's phony from this perspective. Russia is a massive country. It's the largest country on the face of the earth. There is nobody bigger than Russia or harder to get to, as Adolf Hitler found out. Okay?
Yeah.
They are very, very well fortified. They have an endless stream of soldiers. They have an endless army. They have more nuclear weapons than the United States.
Well, Hitler found that out, and Napoleon Bonaparte found that out. It's
Right. Okay. So ask yourself this question. Why would a country like that, with that size and that power, with those armaments, and literally an endless supply of millions of soldiers, right? They can't overrun the semi-gay Zelensky, who is a TV actor dancing around in women's dresses.
Yeah, cross-dresser. You know, I've thought about that for a long time because they obviously don't. There's no way that if Russia said we want that they couldn't occupy the Ukraine like that.
They don't want it.
Something is not being conveyed like what we realize.
Let me tell you what they do want, in my opinion. Vladimir Putin, who is one of the World Economic Forum's, what was that guy, Klaus Schwab? I have a video of Klaus Schwab saying that they're handpicked people, Vladimir Putin, Angela Merkel, Emmanuel Macron, okay?
Putin's married to a man, but I digress.
What Putin wants is he wants the old Soviet Union back. He wants the USSR.
Okay.
That's what his goal is. So you know what he does? He starts a war with Ukraine, which is right on his border. Doesn't have to go very far. And he takes it up to the middle and then just leaves it there. And when things get too quiet, he does an incursion. He drops a couple of bombs. He takes out an apartment building. Everybody gets all excited. And then it goes back to that middle section of where it was. What he wants is to draw NATO into a vast military conflict. And he is using Ukraine as the bait to do that. That's what Putin wants. That's what he's working on. So what is Russia going to do with Iran? Maybe something, maybe nothing. But if it's going to advance his aim at pulling the world into a world war, then he definitely will. If it's something that's going to be only localized to the Middle East, he may or may not care about that.
So here we are, the cup of trembling, everything right back around. You can never get away from Jerusalem. There's something unusual. You can never get away from it. We're going to try to get this out because I think it's so very important. I think one of the things that we have to come away with from this, because we're gonna probably follow up again here in the next week or so. We got to, but one of the things we have to come away with is there needs to be Bible study, and there needs to be a balanced Bible study, because right now the average American Christian is totally out of whack with Israel. Give us your, as we put this to a point so we can get this out. What should the Bible student be thinking of Israel? What's the biblical position for us to think of Israel, the government, its future in connection with being Bible believers and Christians?
Well, I'll try to give a condensed answer to that very broad-ranging question. But simply put, when you read the Old Testament prophecies on our weekly Bible study on Now the End Begins, we spent 4.5 months and we went through every book of the minor prophets, verse by verse. And one of the stunning things that you take away from that is we think that Amos and Habakkuk and Joel and Malachi, right, have all these different things to say. They don't. They all say the same thing in different ways, and
yes,
it's nuanced, and one will add a little here, the other add, something there. But all 12 of the minor prophets tell you exactly the same story, okay? So when you look at the nation of Israel in 2025, and you have people like Alex Jones who talk about Jacob Rothschild was given a letter in 1917, and they called him Lord Rothschild, and he was credited with being the person who is the financial backer of the state of Israel. And he even goes so far to say that he is the one who created the Zionist state of Israel. I'll grant you that. Okay. There was a book that was written back in the 1990s called The Transfer Agreement. And it was a book that was written by the son of 2 Holocaust survivors. And it talks about how in 1933, the Zionist lobby made a financial deal with Adolf Hitler to allow certain Jews to leave Germany with their fortunes and go to Palestine. That is true. That book is true. Okay. Now, that information in the hand of a Tucker Carlson or a Nick Fuentes or a Candace Owens, they say, well, this is not the Israel of God. This is the fake. This is the fake Israel.
That's what they're right. And then then you throw in the craziness of the Ashkenazi and all of that.
Right. But the reason why they think it's the fake Israel with the fake Jews is because they don't understand. They've never read Amos chapter 3 and 4. They've never read Jeremiah chapter 30. God says, when my people are going to be in this time period, I am going to judge them for their wickedness, for their idolatry, and for all the nasty things. Like Tel Aviv is the gay capital of the world.
Yes, people don't. That's why it's referred to as Sodom, I think, over there.
Right. But people are surprised. You think, okay, Nick Fuentes thinks he's coming up with this breaking news, and it's like, dude, Isaiah talked about that, right? Except the Lord had left us a remnant, Isaiah 1:9. We would have been like Sodom and like Gomorrah, right? So when you read the Bible, and Paul says, study to show thyself approved, a workman who needeth not to be ashamed, approved unto God, rightly dividing the word of truth. And when you apply right divisions to what God says about Israel in the end times, everything that the people who hate them say about them is true, but not for the reason that they think it's true. And let me just close with this, and I'm just going to pull it up because I don't have the verse memorized. When you look at the book of Daniel, and everybody likes to debate, was Nebuchadnezzar saved, right? Because he had that 7-year thing, time of Jacob's trouble, and he eats grass like an ox, but then he comes back and he praises God, right? Jeremiah 27, verse 5, this is God talking. I have made the earth, the man, and the beast are upon the ground by my great power and by my outstretched arm, and have given it unto whom it seemed meet unto me. Okay, so God says, I'm the one who made the heaven and the earth and everything in it, and I'm giving it to who I think should have it. Well, look at this. And now have I given all these lands into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, my servant. And the beast of the field have I given him to serve him. And then look down in verse 8. And it shall come to pass that the nation and the kingdom which will not serve the same Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, that will not put their neck under the yoke of the king of Babylon, that nation will I punish. Don't give the devil credit for what God is doing. And just like it was God who put his chosen people into Babylon for 70 years. And when you get to Jeremiah chapter 29, there's explicit instructions. You get married, take wives, take husbands, plant, build, right?
Yep.
Right? People are shocked to find that the devil didn't tell Nebuchadnezzar to go get the army of the Chaldeans and go burn the temple down. God told them to do it. Okay?
The Assyrians were the hand of God. The battle axe in his hand. Yeah.
That's right. And when you go to Isaiah 10, verses 5 and 6, and it says, O Assyrian, the rod of mine anger, and the staff in his hand is mine indignation. I will send him, Antichrist, against a hypocritical people, the Jewish people, right?
Yeah.
Don't blame the devil for what God is doing and what he is about to do with Israel. So to boil it down to 15 seconds, what we are watching with Israel right now are the pre-game preparations for the time of Jacob's trouble.
Yeah. Man, we are right there at it. Okay, we got to cut this, get it out. There is a lot going on. We're going to circle back around here. Depending on what happens next couple of weeks, we want to circle back around.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is exciting times, and this is what it is all about. If you're watching, you've got to go to nowtheendbegins.com. Check out the information there. If you're anywhere near the bookstore, check out the bookstore. They can also order online, I believe. And man, it's always a blessing. You make us think. You make us study the Bible. That's what it's all about. Stay in the fight, brother. If I don't see you soon, I'll see you in the air.
All right. Thank you.
God bless you, bro. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.